After several days of silence, Homan picked up the phone and made a call. His voice, though aged, carried a sense of authority and urgency. He spoke plainly, stating that he needed a young girl. This was not an unusual request for him. Homan, a man soon to turn 90, had lived a life of influence and notoriety. He was a famous journalist, renowned for his sharp writing and compelling stories. Whatever he penned, people devoured it eagerly, making him a household name. Yet, behind his public persona lay a private life shrouded in controversy and desire. The next day, Homan reached out to a woman named Vinnie. Vinnie was no ordinary woman. She operated in the shadows, arranging illicit work for young girls. Over the years, she had facilitated many such arrangements for Homan, becoming his go-to person for these matters. This time, Homan's request was specific. He wanted a young girl to celebrate his upcoming 90th birthday. To him, it was not just a celebration, but a ritual, a way to cling to the youth that had long slipped through his fingers. Vinnie, ever the opportunist, assured him that she would make the necessary arrangements soon. Her tone was calm and businesslike, as if this were just another transaction. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit factory on the outskirts of the city, a group of young girls worked tirelessly. The air was thick with the hum of machinery and the scent of sweat. Among them was Rena, a girl barely 20 years old, whose life was far from easy. Her mother had been bedridden for months, suffering from a prolonged illness, and the mounting medical bills had pushed Rena to the brink of despair. She worked long hours at the factory, her hands calloused and her spirit weary, but it was never enough. Rena's story was one of countless others in the city, a tale of struggle, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of survival. Meanwhile, Homan sat in his sprawling home, a place that bore the marks of his long and eventful life. His maid moved quietly through the rooms, dusting furniture and tidying up. She had been with him for years, a silent witness to his many escapades. As Homan watched her work, his mind drifted back to his younger days. He had been a man of boundless energy and charm, a playboy who lived life on his own terms. In those days, he had taken what he wanted without a second thought, including the maids who worked in his home. They had been part of his world, objects of his fleeting desires, and his current maid was no exception. She had seen it all, the parties, the laughter, the reckless abandon of a man who had never known restraint. That night, as Homan prepared to celebrate his 90th birthday, he dressed with care, donning a suit that still fit him perfectly despite his age. His reflection in the mirror showed a man who had lived hard and fast, his face lined with the stories of 1,000 nights, but his eyes still sparkled with a hint of mischief, a reminder of the man he once was. He left his house and made his way to Vinnie's, a place that had become a second home to him over the years. When he arrived, Vinnie greeted him with a sly smile. "Still chasing young girls at your age?" she teased, her voice laced with both amusement and disbelief. Homan chuckled, brushing off her comment with a wave of his hand. For him, age was just a number, and his desires had not dimmed with the passing years. Vinnie had been his accomplice in these pursuits for 3 decades, arranging encounters that fed his insatiable appetite. She knew him better than most, understanding the emptiness that drove him. Homan had never married, never experienced the kind of love that binds two people together. To him, women were not partners or equals. They were objects of pleasure, tools to satisfy his cravings. His life had been a series of fleeting moments, each one leaving him more hollow than the last. Yet he clung to his ways, unable or unwilling to change. As he stepped into Vinnie's house that night, he was the same man he had always been, selfish, restless, and forever chasing the next thrill. Vinnie led Homan to a dimly lit room and left him standing outside the door. Homan pushed it open and stepped inside, his eyes immediately falling on the young girl lying on the bed. It was Rena, the same girl who worked tirelessly at the factory. Her presence struck him with a mix of surprise and fascination. Rena, in an attempt to conceal her identity, had applied color to her face, hoping to remain unrecognizable later. Homan, momentarily stunned by her youthful beauty, quickly reached for a few strength-enhancing pills he carried with him. He swallowed them and approached the bed, his intentions clear. However, Rena, though physically present, was unwilling to engage with him. Homan, perhaps out of some lingering sense of restraint, did not force her. After several unsuccessful attempts, he quietly lay down beside her and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, Homan awoke before Rena. He placed a stack of money near her, a silent acknowledgement of her presence, and left the room without a word. Rena, who desperately needed the money for her ailing mother, accepted it without protest. Later that day, Homan was at his office, where his colleagues greeted him with cheerful birthday wishes. They had arranged a cake and a small celebration, filling the room with laughter and camaraderie. Homan smiled and played along, but his mind was elsewhere. Meanwhile, Rena wandered through the bustling market, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and curiosity. As she walked, she spotted Homan heading toward his home. She stopped in her tracks and observed him from a distance, her eyes following his every move. Homan paused to chat with some friends along the way, his demeanor relaxed and confident. Rena watched intently, her interest in him growing. After a while, Homan continued on his way and reached home. Shortly after, he received a call from Vinnie, who informed him that the girl from the previous night wanted to meet him again. Homan was taken aback. He hesitated, fearing that Rena might mock him for his inability to act the night before. He declined the meeting, but Vinny, ever persistent, gave him time to reconsider before ending the call. The next day, as Homan strolled through the neighborhood, Rena spotted him again. This time, she decided to follow him, her curiosity turning into something more. After trailing him for a while, she threw a bracelet near him and quickly ran away, her heart pounding. Homan noticed the bracelet and picked it up, puzzled but intrigued. When he returned home, Vinny called again, pressing him about meeting the girl. This time, after a moment of thought, Homan agreed. That night, Rena was with Homan once more. He admired her beauty as she lay peacefully on the bed, her innocence captivating him in a way he hadn't expected. For the first time, Homan felt something deeper, a flicker of genuine affection. Yet, once again, he did nothing and left quietly in the morning. Back at home, Homan found himself consumed by thoughts of Rena. Vinny called him later, informing him that the girl had told her nothing had happened between them. Vinny offered to arrange another girl, but Homan surprised her by saying he liked this one and would soon make his move. The following night, Homan met Rena again, this time bringing her an expensive gift. He praised her beauty, his words sincere and heartfelt. Rena, touched by his compliments and the thoughtful present, began to see Homan in a different light. The night after that, Homan visited her once more, and this time their connection deepened into an intimate moment. From then on, Rena's life became a balancing act. She worked at the factory during the day and spent her nights with Homan at Vinny's house. One day, while Homan was at home, his maid, who had been with him for years, asked him where he went every night. Homan ignored her at first, but when she persisted, he snapped at her to mind her own business. That night, Rena came to Homan again, and they shared another intimate moment. Afterward, Homan read stories to her until they both drifted off to sleep. Late into the night, Rena woke up and went to the bathroom. While she was away, Vinny entered the room and urgently woke Homan. She led him to another room, where a man's lifeless body lay on the floor. Homan was horrified and demanded to know what had happened. Vinny explained that the man had come for pleasure, but the girl he was with had killed him and fled with his money. She needed Homan's help to dispose of the body. As Vinny and Homan discussed the situation, Rena returned from the bathroom and stumbled upon the scene. Her heart raced as she saw the dead body in Vinny's lap. Terrified, she hid behind a wall, convinced that Vinny and Homan were murderers who might kill her too. Vinny, unaware of Rena's presence, handed the body to a man tasked with disposing of it, leaving Rena shaken and unsure of what to do next. Seeing all this, Rena fled in fear. When Homan returned to the room, Rena was gone. Days passed, and Rena did not return. Homan searched for her throughout the city, often imagining he saw her, but his efforts were in vain. His obsession grew with each passing day, consuming his thoughts and driving him to the brink of despair. One day, his search led him to the factory where Rena had once worked. He walked through the rows of workers, his eyes scanning every face, but failed to recognize her. The Rena he knew seemed to have vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a void that he could not fill. Despite his tireless efforts, Homan's quest proved futile. The city, once familiar and comforting, now felt vast and alien, as if it were conspiring to keep Rena hidden from him. Frustration gnawed at him, and his desperation grew more intense. He began to lose sleep, his mind haunted by visions of her and the fear that he might never see her again. His once orderly life had spiraled into chaos, all for the sake of finding the woman who had captured his heart. Eventually, a glimmer of hope emerged. Through a combination of persistence and sheer luck, Homan managed to uncover Vinny's hiding place. Vinny, who had fled the city out of fear of the police, had been lying low, avoiding any attention. When Homan confronted her, his demeanor was a mix of anger and desperation. He demanded answers, his voice trembling with emotion as he pleaded for information about Rena's whereabouts. Vinny, however, remained calm and composed. She looked at him with a knowing gaze as if she understood the depth of his torment. "Wait for the right time," she told him cryptically, her tone leaving no room for argument. On the other side, Rena longed to meet Homan, but her circumstances held her back. Fear, uncertainty, and the weight of her situation made her hesitate. She was torn between her feelings for Homan and the reality of her life, which seemed to pull her in a different direction. Meanwhile, Homan remained unaware of her internal struggle, consumed by his own desperation to find her. One day, a glimmer of hope appeared for Homan when he received a letter inviting him to Vinny's house. That night, he arrived at Vinny's place, his mind filled with dreams of seeing her again. But as he entered the room, his hopes were shattered. Instead of Rena, he saw another girl lying on the bed. Overwhelmed by anger and betrayal, Homan lost control. He began breaking things in a fit of rage, his emotions spilling over in a chaotic outburst. Hearing the commotion, Vinny rushed in and tried to calm him down. She explained the situation with a heavy heart, revealing that Rena's mother had arranged her marriage. The news struck Homan like a thunderbolt. He was devastated. He had always dreamed of marrying Rena, and the thought of her being with someone else was unbearable. Yet, it seemed fate had other plans. Perhaps Rena was never meant to be his. Time passed, and Homan found himself sitting alone on a quiet beach, lost in memories of Rena. Rena. The waves crashed against the shore, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. As he sat there, an elderly lady, around 70 years old, approached him. She had recently become a widow and was seeking solace in the serene surroundings. They began talking, and slowly, a bond formed between them. Homan, who had spent his life chasing fleeting pleasures and superficial relationships, found something he had never truly experienced before: genuine connection and companionship. Though he had not ended up with Rena, Homan realized that life had given him a different kind of gift. The elderly lady became his companion, and together they found comfort and happiness in each other's company. As the sun set on the horizon, Homan reflected on his journey. He had searched for love in all the wrong places, but in the end, it found him in the most unexpected way. And with this, his story came to a peaceful close.